The Forgotten Hangars. The hangar stood alone at the far edge of the old airstrip, a relic of another time, forgotten by progress and swallowed by decay. Rust crept across its steel frame like a slow disease, eating away at what had once been a place of purpose. The runway leading to it had long since cracked open, weeds forcing their way through the concrete, reclaiming what humanity had abandoned. No planes had landed here in decades. No lights had burned in its windows. And no one went near it anymore. The villagers avoided it with a quiet, unspoken agreement. They never mentioned it directly, but everyone knew. If conversation ever drifted too close, voices lowered, eyes shifted, someone would change the subject. They said the hangar was cursed. They said strange lights flickered inside at night. They said sometimes if the wind was still, you could hear something breathing. No one had tried to confirm it. No one wanted to. To them, the hangar was a grave. To Armin Hale, it was an inheritance. The letter had arrived without warning. Plain envelope, no return address, just his name written in handwriting he hadn't seen in years. Inside, there was no explanation, no sentiment. Only a legal document. And a single handwritten note. The hangar is yours, finish what I couldn't. Elias Hale. That was all. No apologies. No explanation for his disappearance. No answers. Armin had stared at those words for a long time. 10 years. 10 years since he had last seen his grandfather. The man had always been difficult. Brilliant, yes, respected once, but distant, obsessed. The kind of person who saw the world not as it was, but as it could be, if only everyone else would get out of the way. And then one day, he had simply vanished. No goodbye. No trace. Just silence. The authorities had searched, of course, for a while. But Elias Hale was an old man with no close ties, no recent contacts. Eventually, the case had gone cold. The village filled in the blanks. Madness, they said. Isolation. Some whispered darker things. Experiments. Armin had left soon after. It was easier to forget from a distance. Easier not to think about the old man, or the hangar that stood like a wound at the edge of the village. Easier to pretend it didn't matter. Until now, the journey back had been quiet. The village hadn't changed much. Time seemed to move differently here, slower, as if reluctant to disturb the stillness. The same narrow roads, the same aging houses, the same watchful eyes following him as he passed. They recognized him. Of course they did. And they knew why he had come. By the time he reached the airstrip, the sun was already beginning its slow descent, casting long shadows across the cracked concrete. The hangar loomed ahead. Even after all these years, it was larger than he remembered. Or maybe it just felt that way now. Armin stopped several meters from the massive steel doors. For a moment, he simply stood there. Looking, listening, waiting, nothing, no movement, no sound. Just wind brushing through dry grass. And yet, there was something. A feeling. Subtle. Persistent. Like standing at the edge of something vast and unseen. He frowned, shaking his head. Just nerves, he muttered. But the words felt hollow. The doors were worse up close. The metal was thick, reinforced, designed to withstand far more than weather and time. Rust had welded parts of it together, sealing it shut as if the hangar itself didn't want to be opened again. There was no visible lock. No keypad. Nothing obvious. Of course there was. His grandfather had never believed in obvious solutions. Armin ran his hand along the surface, feeling the cold, rough texture beneath his fingers. This is ridiculous, he said under his breath. Then he set down his bag, pulled out a crowbar, and got to work. The first hour passed with little progress. The second brought frustration. By the third, his hands were blistered, his shirt soaked with sweat, and his patience nearly gone. Come on, he growled, forcing the crowbar into a narrow gap. The metal groaned in protest. And then, a sudden, violent shift. The seal broke. The doors lurched inward with a deafening screech, the sound echoing across the empty airstrip like a warning. Dust burst outward in a thick cloud, spilling into the fading light. For a moment, Armin stepped back, coughing, waving his hand in front of his face. The air that escaped was cold, far colder than it should have been. Not just cool from disuse. Cold. Alive. Armin hesitated. Something about that bothered him. This place had been sealed for years. It should have been stagnant, stale. Instead, it felt active. Probably insulation, he said aloud, trying to convince himself. Old systems, maybe something's still running. Maybe. He picked up his flashlight, switched it on, and stepped inside. Darkness swallowed him immediately. The light from outside barely reached past the entrance, leaving the interior in deep shadow. His flashlight cut through it in a narrow beam, illuminating particles of dust that drifted slowly through the air. The hangar was massive, larger than any standard structure of its kind. The ceiling arched high overhead, disappearing into darkness. Steel beams crisscrossed above, thick and reinforced, designed for weight far beyond what any aircraft would require. That was the first thing that struck him. This wasn't just a hangar. It had been built for something else. Rows of equipment lined the walls. Machines, consoles, containers, most of them covered in dust, some partially dismantled, others completely unfamiliar. Armin moved slowly, sweeping the beam of his flashlight across the room. Nothing here looked standard. Nothing looked normal. He paused beside a large, cylindrical device, its surface etched with markings he didn't recognize. Not language. Not exactly. More like symbols. Patterns. What were you doing here? He murmured. The question lingered in the air, unanswered. Then he felt it. The cold. It grew stronger the deeper he went. Not a gradual shift, but a presence, like stepping into a space that rejected warmth entirely. His breath began to fog. That's not possible, he whispered. There was no active climate control. No visible power sources. And yet the temperature continued to drop. And with it came something else. A sensation he couldn't quite explain. He wasn't alone. Armin stopped. Listened. Nothing. No footsteps. No movement. But the feeling remained. Persistent. Watching. He forced himself to move again. Step by step. Toward the far end of the hangars. That's where the sound was coming from. A faint hum. Steady. Rhythmic. Alive. The beam of his flashlight finally caught it. A structure set apart from the rest of the hangar, enclosed in reinforced steel and thick frosted glass. A chamber. Unlike everything else in the hangar. It was still functioning. Lights flickered along its surface, dim but active. Panels glowed faintly, their screens filled with data that still scrolled, still updated as if the system had never been abandoned. Armin's pulse quickened. How? He approached slowly. Carefully. A console stood beside the chamber, its screen blinking intermittently. He brushed away a layer of dust. The display sharpened. Status cryogenic preservation active. Armin stared at the words. Cryogenic. That's impossible, he said. This place hasn't had power in years. And yet, the system was running. The hum grew louder as he stepped closer. The cold intensified, biting through his clothes. His gaze shifted to the glass. It was opaque with frost, thick enough to obscure whatever lay inside. He hesitated. Something in him didn't want to see. Didn't want to know. But curiosity, no, something stronger than curiosity, pulled him forward. He raised his hand, pressed it against the glass. It was freezing. Painfully so. With his sleeve, he wiped away a section of frost. Slowly, carefully, and then he saw them. Armin's breath caught. Shapes, large, curved, arranged in a circular formation within the chamber. At first, his mind refused to process what he was seeing. It searched for alternatives. Machines, containers, anything but what they truly were. But there was no denying it. Eggs, 8 of them. Each one was massive, easily the size of a large barrel. Their surfaces were unlike anything he had ever seen, layered with crystalline scales that shimmered faintly beneath the ice. Even through the frost, colors bled through. Deep crimson, vivid emerald, a black so dark it seemed to absorb the light itself. And others, colors that didn't seem to belong to any natural spectrum. They pulsed faintly, almost imperceptibly. Alive, Armin stumbled back. No, he whispered. No, that's not possible. His mind raced, grasping for logic for reason. There had to be an explanation. A scientific one. A rational one. But there was only one word that fit. One word he didn't want to say. Dragons. The sound of it echoed in the empty hangar. Absurd. Impossible. And yet, a crack broke the silence. Sharp, clear. Armin froze. The sound hadn't come from the building. It hadn't come from outside. It had come from inside the chamber. Slowly he turned. His eyes locked onto one of the eggs. The smallest. Its surface was a deep silver blue like frozen starlight. It moved. Not much. Just a slight tremor. But enough. Enough to shatter any illusion that this was some kind of preserved specimen. A thin line of light appeared along its surface. A crack. Armin's heart pounded. No, no, no. He took a step back. Then another. The crack widened. Something shifted inside. Not randomly. Not like settling material. Deliberately. Alive. Watching. Armin's breath came faster now. For the first time since entering the hangar, fear truly took hold. Not the distant unease from before. Not the quiet discomfort. This was different. This was real. Because whatever his grandfather had been hiding, whatever had been sleeping in this place for years, was waking up. And it was not alone. The hum of the chamber deepened. The temperature dropped further. And the crack spread. Slowly, inevitably, something inside the egg shifted again. Pressing against the shell. Testing it. Armin couldn't move. Couldn't look away. He felt it now. That presence from before. Stronger. Closer. Not just watching. Reaching. The light within the crack pulsed softly. And for a moment, just a moment, Armin could have sworn something on the other side was looking back. The awakening. Armin didn't leave. He should have. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to turn around, to walk out of the hangar, to seal those massive steel doors and pretend none of this had ever existed. To tell himself it was some elaborate illusion, a trick of light and exhaustion, a hallucination born from too many years of distance and too many unanswered questions. That would have been the easy choice. The safe choice. The human choice. But Armin Hale had never been very good at choosing the easy path. He stood there staring through the frost-covered glass, his breath shallow, his pulse pounding in his ears as the faint crack in the silver-blue egg slowly widened. It was subtle, slow, but undeniable. Something inside was alive. The word repeated itself in his mind over and over, as if trying to carve itself into reality. Alive, 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 and not just alive. Aware. That was the part that unsettled him the most. It wasn't random movement. It wasn't the twitch of something newly formed or half-conscious. There was intent, a rhythm, a patience that felt far too deliberate for something that had not yet even been born. Armin swallowed hard. His hand tightened around the flashlight, though he wasn't sure why. Light wasn't going to help him here. Nothing he had brought with him was going to help. Think, he muttered under his breaths. Just think. Panic wouldn't solve anything. Running wouldn't solve anything. And if what he was seeing was real, if those things were truly what they appeared to be, then leaving them here alone might be the worst possible decision he could make. Finish what I couldn't. The words echoed in his mind, louder now, heavier. They didn't feel like a suggestion anymore. They felt like a responsibility. Armin exhaled slowly. Then, despite every instinct telling him otherwise, he stepped forward. The hum of the chamber grew stronger as he approached, a low, steady vibration that seemed to resonate not just in the air but in his bones. The temperature dropped further, cold seeping through his clothes, biting at his skin, but he barely noticed it now. His focus was locked on the egg. The silver-blue shell shimmered faintly, its surface catching the dim light from the console beside the chamber. The crack had grown. Just a fraction, but enough. Inside, something shifted again. Armin's breath hitched. He forced himself to look away. Just for a moment. Just long enough to gather himself. The console. If his grandfather had built this, whatever this was, then there had to be answers. Records, data, something that could explain what he was looking at. He moved toward the control panel, each step deliberate, careful, as though sudden movement might somehow provoke whatever lay within the chamber. The screen flickered as he approached, its surface coated in a thin layer of dust. Armin wiped it clean with the sleeve of his jacket. The display sharpened. Stabilized. Lines of text scrolled across the screen, old systems struggling to maintain coherence after years, decades of uninterrupted operation. He leaned closer. Readings. Species Draconis Primordia. Status Extinction Level Event Containment. Project HFY. The words hit him like a physical blow. Extinction, he whispered. Containment. The implications settled in slowly. Heavy. Unavoidable. This wasn't preservation. It wasn't study. It wasn't research. This was the aftermath of something catastrophic. Armin's fingers hovered over the console. For a moment, he hesitated. Part of him didn't want to know. Didn't want to confirm what his mind was already beginning to understand. But that part didn't win. He pressed the first blinking icon. The system responded with a stutter. Then, files opened. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Logs, data streams, visual recordings, fragmented reports stitched together from incomplete transmissions. Armin selected one at random. The screen flickered. Stabilized. And then, a voice filled the chamber. Old, worn, but unmistakable. Elias Hale. If you're hearing this, the voice began, distorted slightly by time and degradation, then I'm gone. Armin's breath caught. He hadn't expected that. Not like this. Not so direct. And that means the eggs have survived. Armin turned instinctively toward the chamber. Toward the eggs. Survived. The word echoed in his mind, heavier now. They are not weapons, Ilias' voice continued. They are not experiments. A pause. Long. Waited. They are refugees. The screen shifted. Images replaced the text. Armin's eyes widened. A sky dark, fractured, burning with streaks of light. Cities below reduced to ruins, structures collapsing under impacts that came from above. And then, creatures. Massive. Winged. Majestic. Dragons. They filled the sky, their forms cutting through clouds and fire alike, scales reflecting the chaos around them. Some breath streams of flame or energy that twisted through the air like living things. Others fell, struck down by beams of blinding light. Ships hovered above them. Enormous, angular, cold. They glowed with an unnatural intensity, their surfaces pulsing with power that dwarfed everything below. The dragons fought. Fiercely, desperately, but they were losing. They were hunted, Ilias said quietly. Systematically, relentlessly. One of the dragons, a massive creature with wings like molten gold, was struck mid-flight. Its roar echoed even through the silent recording as it fell, crashing into the ruins below. Not by us, Ilias continued, but by something far worse. Armin felt his stomach drop. This wasn't history. This wasn't myth. This had happened. Somewhere, and whatever had done it was still out there. The recording shifted again. The images faded. I found them too late, Ilya said. By the time I reached their world, it was already over. A new image appeared. A barren landscape. Ash drifting through the air. No movement. No life. Except 8 shapes. Eggs. Resting in the ruins of something that might once have been a sanctuary. I couldn't save them, Ilya said. But I could save these. The image zoomed in. 8 eggs. The same ones. The ones inside the chamber. Armin's chest tightened. They are the last of their kind, Ilya's continued. The final generation of the Draconis. Silence followed. Heavy. Unavoidable. Armin's gaze drifted back to the chamber. To the eggs. Late. That was all. 8 lives. Holding the weight of an entire species. They cannot hatch here, Ilya said. Not alone. The recording crackled, the audio distorting slightly. Their biology, their consciousness, it doesn't function the way ours does. Armin leaned closer. They require a bond. The words hung in the air. A connection, a partner, someone they choose. The silver-blue egg pulsed faintly. Armin froze. It wasn't coincidence. It was responding. If they wake without that bond, Elias continued, his voice growing more urgent, they will not understand this world. Images flashed again. Rapid. Chaotic. A dragon newly hatched lashing out in confusion, its power tearing through everything around it. Another smaller curled in on itself, its light fading. Dying. They will either destroy everything around them in fierce. A pause. Or they will die. The recording flickered. And if they die, static, then that's it. Silence. They are gone forevers. The message ended. The hangar fell quiet. Armin stood there unmoving. The weight of it settled slowly. Heavily. 8 lives. 8 chances. And no one else. Just him. His gaze drifted back to the chamber. The silver-blue egg was no longer still. It moved. Not just physically. It reached. The glass trembled slightly, a subtle vibration that had nothing to do with the machinery around it. Armin stepped closer. Something brushed against his mind. He stopped. The sensation was faint at first. Barely noticeable. Like a whisper at the edge of thought. Cold. Curious. And overwhelmingly. Alone. Armin's breath caught. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't a voice. But it was something. A presence. He swallowed hard. He began, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what you want. The egg pulsed. Brighter this time. The crack widened. The presence pressed closer. Tentative. Uncertain. Reaching. Armin hesitated. Everything about this felt wrong. Impossible. And yet, he understood. Not with words. Not with logic. But with something deeper. It was searching. For him. Slowly, carefully, he raised his hand. The glass was still frozen. Still solid. A barrier between two worlds. But the moment his palm touched its surface, everything changed. The connection snapped into place. Armin gasped. A surge of energy tore through him, sharp and overwhelming, flooding his senses with images that weren't his own. He was no longer in the hangars. He was falling. Through endless sky. Through stars that burned brighter than anything he had ever seen. Through worlds that stretched beyond imagination. He saw vast landscapes untouched by time. Mountains that pierced the clouds. Oceans that glowed beneath alien suns. And dragons. So many dragons. They filled the skies, their wings casting shadows across entire continents, their voices echoing like thunder. They were not animals. They were not beasts. They were something more. Ancient. Intelligent. Connected. And then, fire. The sky turned black. The stars disappeared. The ships came. Destruction followed. Armin felt it. The fear. The confusion. The loss. One by one, the lights in the sky went out. Until only silence remained. And beneath it all, a single fragile thread. Hope. Armin collapsed to one knee, gasping for breath. The connection broke. The hangar rushed back into focus. The cold, the hum, the eggs. The silver blue shell cracked further, pieces of it flacking away as the light within grew stronger. Armin pressed a hand against the floor, steadying himself. Okay, he breathed. His voice trembled. Okay. He looked up. I'm here. The egg pulsed. The response was immediate. And then, the alarms blared. A deafening, piercing sound tore through the hangar, red lights flashing along the walls, as the system shifted into emergency mode. Cryogenic failure DATCTD. Containment breach imminent. Armin's head snapped toward the console. No. The temperature spiked, then dropped, then spiked again. The system was collapsing. Inside the chamber, all 8 eggs began to move. Not ones, all of them. Cracks spread across their surfaces, thin lines of light breaking through the frost. Armin's heart raced. Wait, no, one at a time, he shouted, panic rising. But it didn't matter. Whatever had kept them stable was failing. The hum of the chamber grew louder, unstable now, fluctuating wildly. The entire hangar trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling. Metal groaned under stress. And outside, something moved. Armin froze. A shadow passed over the entrance. Large, impossible. He turned slowly toward the open doors. The sky beyond had changed. Darkened. Shapes moved within the clouds. Massive, silent, watching. Armin's breath caught. They found you. Behind him, the eggs cracked further. Time had run out. Fire in the sky. The first egg shattered. The sound cut through the chaos like a blade, sharp, final, undeniable. For a fraction of a second, everything seemed to pause. The alarms. The trembling of the hangar. Even Armin's racing thoughts. All of it faded beneath that single, decisive crack. Then the world surged forward again. The silver blue shell split apart, fragments breaking loose in a cascade of frost and crystalline shards. A burst of pale light filled the chamber, pushing outward in a wave that sent cold air rushing across the floor like a living thing. Armin flinched, raising an arm to shield his eyes. The temperature plummeted instantly. His breath turned to mist. The very air seemed to freeze around him. And from within the shattered shell, something moved. A small form tumbled forward, unsteady, fragile, its wings folded tightly against its body. It landed softly against the chamber floor, its movement clumsy, uncoordinated. No. For a moment, it didn't move at all. Armin lowered his arm slowly. His breath caught in his throat. A dragon. Not massive, not yet the towering presence he had seen in the recordings. But there was no mistaking what it was. Its body was sleek and delicate, its scales shimmering with a pale silver-blue glow that shifted like starlight on frozen water. Frost clung to its wings, thin membranes that trembled as it breathed for the first time. Its chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven motions. Alive, Armin took a step forward. Then another. Every instinct told him to be careful. To be slow. This was not something that belonged in his world. And yet, it was here. The chamber door remained sealed, a thick barrier of reinforced glass and steel separating him from the creature. For a moment, he hesitated. Behind him, the alarm screamed louder. Cryogenic failure DATCTD. Containment breach imminent. The other eggs were cracking. Time was running out. Armin moved. He reached the console, his fingers flying across the surface as he searched for a manual override. The interface flickered, resisting him, old systems straining under the pressure of imminent failure. Come on, he muttered. Come on. A panel flashed red. Access restricted. Armin clenched his jaw. Not today. He slammed his palm against the override sequence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a hiss. The chamber door unlocked. With a heavy mechanical groan, it slid open. Cold air surged outward, spilling into the hangar like a living tide. It wrapped around Armin, biting at his skin, seeping through his clothes, but he barely noticed. His focus was entirely on the small figure lying within. He stepped inside. The air was sharper here. Cleaner. Charged. The hatchling stirred. Its body twitched slightly, its wings flexing weakly as it adjusted to the sudden absence of the cryogenic field. Then, its eyes opened. They glowed. Not brightly, not harshly, but with a depth that made Armin freeze where he stood. Ancient. That was the only word that fit. Those eyes did not belong to something newly born. They carried weight, memory, awareness. For a moment, the world seemed to fall away. Armin and the hatchling simply looked at each other. Then, it saw him, truly saw him, and something changed. A pulse of energy rippled through the space between them, subtle but undeniable. It wasn't physical. It wasn't something he could touch or measure. But he felt it, deep, resonating through his mind, his body, his very sense of self. Recognition. The hatchling tilted its head slightly, its gaze fixed on him. Curious, uncertain. Armin swallowed. He took a slow step forward. Then another. It's okay, he said softly. His voice sounded small in the vast chamber. Fragile. I'm not going to hurt you. The hatchling watched him. Waiting. Testing. Armin knelt slowly, lowering himself to its level. Every movement was deliberate. Careful. He extended his hand. The hatchling's body tensed slightly, its wings twitching. For a moment, Armin thought it might recoil. Might lash out. But it didn't. Instead, it leaned forward. Tentative. Its small, cool snout brushed against his fingers. And the moment they touched, everything changed. The bond snapped into place. Armin gasped. The world exploded into light. He was no longer in the hangars. He was flying. The sky stretched endlessly around him, vast and boundless, filled with currents of air that carried him effortlessly forward. He felt the wind beneath his wings. No, not his wings. The hatchling. Their senses merged, overlapping, intertwining. He felt its heartbeat. Vast, unsteady. He felt its confusion, its fear, and beneath it all, a deep aching loneliness. Alone, the emotion struck him with a force that stole his breath. For so long, so very long. Then, something new. Warmth, presence, him. The hatchling's awareness wrapped around him, hesitant at first, then stronger, more certain. Not alone. The thought wasn't spoken. It didn't need to be. Armin felt it. He steadied himself, grounding his thoughts. It's okay, he whispered again, though he wasn't sure if the words were for the hatchling or for himself. The connection stabilized. The overwhelming flood of sensation faded, leaving behind a steady, quiet link. He could still feel it. The hatchling. Its awareness lingered at the edge of his mind, curious, alert, watching. Trusting. Armin let out a slow breath. It's okay, he said more firmly this time. I've got you. The hatchling responded immediately. It leaned into his hand, its small body pressing closer, seeking warmth, seeking reassurance. And in that moment, the bond sealed. Not forced, not imposed, chosen. Armin felt it settle into place, something fundamental shifting within him. They were connected now, not as master and creature, not as owner and pet, but as something else, something equal, something shared, a partnership. Outside, the sky split open. The sound came first, a deep, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through the very air, growing louder with each passing second. Armin's head snapped up. The hangar darkened. Shadows stretched across the floor, swallowing the dim light that had filtered in from outside. Slowly, he turned toward the open doors and saw them. Shapes descended from the clouds. Massive, Angular. Wrong. They moved with a precision that felt unnatural, their surfaces gleaming with a cold, metallic sheen that reflected nothing around them. Ships. Not humans. Not anything he had ever seen. They hovered above the airstrip, their presence blotting out the sky, casting everything below into shadow. Armin's chest tightened. They found you, he whispered. The hatchling stirred in his arms. Its body tensed. Its wings spread slightly, the thin membranes catching the dim light. A low sound escaped it. Not quite a growls. Not quite a hiss. Something instinctive. Armin felt the shift instantly. Through the bond, the hatchling's awareness sharpened. Focused. It wasn't confused anymore. It understood. One word formed in Armin's mind. Clear. Unmistakable. Zenami. The ships moved. Without warnings, they fired. A beam of light lanced downward, cutting through the air with terrifying precision. It struck the far side of the airstrip. The ground exploded. Concrete melted instantly, liquefying under the intensity of the impact. The shockwave rippled outward, shattering what remained of the runway, sending debris flying in all directions. Heat washed over the hangar. Armin staggered back. The war had followed them. There was no doubt now. The dragons had not escaped. They had been tracked, hunted, and now, the hunt had reached Earth. Behind him, the remaining eggs cracked. One by one, lines of light spread across their surfaces, the fractures deepening as whatever lay within pushed outward. Armin turned. He could feel them now. 8 presences. Faint, unformed, but alive. Awakening. The hatchling in his arms shifted, its gaze fixed on the eggs. Something passed through the bond. Recognition. Family. Armin's grip tightened slightly. His grandfather's words echoed in his mind. They need a guardians. Someone they choose. He looked down at the hatchling. It looked back at him. Waiting. Trusting. Armin exhaled slowly. This was it. This was the moment. His grandfather hadn't left him a building. He hadn't left him a project. He had left him a choice. Run or fight. The ships outside shifted again, their weapons charging for another strike. The hangar trembled. Time was running out. Armin closed his eyes for a moment. Then, he smiled. Not out of confidence. Not out of certainty. But because he finally understood. All right, he said quietly. He opened his eyes. Let's show them why humanity doesn't lose. The first of the remaining eggs shattered. Then another, and another. 8 explosions of light and frost filled the chamber as the shells broke apart, fragments scattering across the floor. Small forms emerged from within. Dragons. Different. Each one unique. A crimson hatchling with scales like burning embers. An emerald one that shimmered like living forest. A black one that seemed to absorb the light around it. They stumbled forward unsteady but alive. Their eyes opened. And one by one, they saw him. The bonds formed. Not as strong. Not yet. But enough. Enough to connect them. To guide them. To anchor them. The hangar filled with sound. 8 voices. Young. Fierce. Roaring. The sound shook the air, echoing far beyond the walls of the hangar, rising into the sky above. The ships paused. Just for a moment. As if surprised. As if uncertain. Because what stood beneath them was not what they had expected. Not just a man. Not just dragons. But something new. Something they had never encountered before. A bond. Between species. Between worlds. Humanity. And the last of the Draconis. Together, Armin stepped forward, the hatchling in his arms lifting its head, its small body radiating a growing energy. The others gathered behind him, their presence building, their strength increasing with each passing second. They were not ready. Not fully, but they were not alone. And that changed everything. Above them, the ships adjusted, their weapons shifting, recalibrating, preparing. But this time, the battle would not be one-sided. This time, the dragons had something they had not had before. A chance. Armin raised his head, meeting the silent, watching shapes above. His fear was still there, but it no longer controlled him, because he was no longer just a man standing alone in an abandoned hangar. He was something more. A guardian, a partner, a bridge between worlds. And he would not let them fall. Not again. The hatchling in his arms spread its wings. And for the first time, it roared. The sound was small, but it carried, and it was answered. 8 voices rising together, filling the sky with a promise. They would not run. They would not hide. And this time, they would not go extinct.